Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And we're going to get right down into a conversation with Dr. Shila Patel. She's got tons and tons of experience. She has lived in multiple countries. She considers herself a global citizen. And we're going to talk today about something that is really near and dear to my heart, and that is her experiences and in realizing why it's so important to have passion in your life, to have purpose in your life, and to leave an amazing legacy behind. And all of this is about living a great life, living a good life. And you've heard me say this before, it's all about love. But the whole idea here is for us to learn about Sheila's experience and where she's been and where she's coming from, and how we can take some of her experiences and apply them to our own lives. Dr. Shila Patel. Sheila, welcome to Finding Better. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me on your show, John. Appreciate it.
Okay, this is a treat. This is a treat. First of all, what is your background there?
Well, that is the Amsterdam Canal.
Got it. Okay.
And
Okay.
I had just bought this picture for a friend who I am the main caregiver for he has tongue cancer. And so
Oh.
being a physician, I've been taking care of him and going to all his appointments. And so one day we were in a furniture store and found this picture. And he says, I know that. I have been there. And he was so excited about it.
Oh,
It has
nice.
been the greatest background for my podcast.
Okay. Good, 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 good. Well, listen, we're not gonna, we could talk about all kinds of things, you being a doctor and everything. But I want to talk about life.
Right.
Okay. Want to talk about your experiences. So tell us that you were born in Africa, you've lived in the UK, and now you live in the United States. So tell us a little bit about that journey as it relates to passion, purpose, and legacy.
Well, let's start off with my living in Africa, first of all, or
Yes.
a little bit before that, because I was really born into an Indian family, which was very conservative Indian.
Hmm.
And as everyone knows, a lot of the Asian countries, and sadly, even in this country, sometimes females are seen as second-class citizens.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
grew up very quiet, timid, and just looking at life from a perspective. And what I remember in my life was I was kind of morose, and I would even say I used to listen to Carpenter songs. And she
I love the Carpenters. I love
but
Karen Carpenter. Yeah.
she died of anorexia. So there was always this
Yes. Yes.
melancholy and sadness. And I
Yes.
could really kind of relate to some of that. And then I had a friend, a lot of people talk about high school friends, and I get really jealous that I don't have so many high school or college friends. But this was a friend I had in high school, and we lived in the same apartment complex. And she, for whatever reason, decided to commit suicide.
Oh.
She jumped off the building, and
Oh.
thank God she didn't die, but it was a real awakening in me, I think, of what life is about and why
Right.
somebody would do that.
Right.
And I left Africa, and after I finished high school, I went to England. And it was funny because I kept in touch more with her sister than her. And I got into medical school. And one of the things that I really like to talk to the children about is the level of confidence, because my father really installed that in me. He was a very hard worker. He was very strict. He expected very good education, and he expected us to get our homework done. He expected us to make good grades and leave all the socializing. But my father also installed in us a real sense of adventure, of traveling. And when I got to England, and I ended up going for an interview for dental school initially.
Hmm.
And I was amazed that I was offered a place at the London School of Dentistry. Well, I also was dating a boyfriend who went off to medical school and he couldn't live without me. So he asked me to go to St. Andrews to visit him for a weekend. And of course, that was a no-no for my parents. But
Mm.
one of the things I like to teach the kids is that if you do everything right, sometimes you can be a little sneaky and get away with doing
It's
something
okay.
wrong.
It's okay.
And that's okay. But it's that
I don't want my kids talking to you. So anyway, go ahead.
but that was one of the things that I went up to St. Andrews from London and I went to meet the dean of medical school and talk about confidence at the age of 17, 18, from this timid, shy girl to going to talk to the dean of medical school. And he offered me a place for medical school for the
Wow.
following year. And so that's how I ended up becoming a physician and a doctor. But during my medical training, also, I had a friend who had bipolar disorder. And it was really sad because for 7 years, he struggled going through all the preclinical and clinical. And then he had his very first episode of really bad depression.
Mm.
And the teachers were great because they tried to help him, they tried to keep him in school. And sadly, he ended up having to drop out after 7 years. His
Oh,
family was wonderful because they supported him. And he has actually lived a very productive life being an accountant. What that really taught me was the sense of perseverance, the family support. And that's what mental health, being in the mental health field has always taught me, is that the people that do really well are the ones that really have the family support. And I think having those two experiences early on in my life really drove me into going into psychiatry. And I worked hard, saw thousands of patients, worked one-on-one. But then it's like you and me, John. I think that's why I relate to you so much, is that we retired early, but then we had to find something to do after. And I love traveling. Like I said, my dad had really installed a sense of adventure, traveling, experiencing different cultures. And I really was leading, like you said, a good life, but I was retired, not really having a purpose, but I was still, I worked as the treasurer in a condominium complex. I do a lot of things around the condominium stuff just to give back. Because
yep.
one of the things
Yep.
that I have really learned from my parents is giving back into the community. And my
Absolutely.
father has been amazing, that he was almost like the godfather in Lakeland, because when they came to Florida almost 50 years ago. And at that time, there weren't very many Indian families in Lakeland. And so he was able to have people come over. My mother would actually have them living in the house. Dad and mom would settle them. And that was his way of constantly giving back to the
Sure.
people, settle
Hmm.
them. And I think that sense of giving back has been installed in me so much. And so when the pandemic hit and I realized that when everything was shut down, it was going to be a cold society. There was going to be problems. There were going to be mental health issues. And I am surrounded by brainiacs, John. To tell you the truth, this place is all about space and NASA and engineers and
And
clean
birds of a feather flock together. So you are you're part of that brain trust, I'm
and,
sure.
and so they were like, well, you're a psychiatrist. You need to write some books. And I'm like, no. I said, all through my medical career, I didn't want to write papers. I didn't want to put myself out. I wasn't a speaker. I used to give some talks about, holiday stress and how to deal with, and parenting has been a big issue for me.
So let's talk about okay, I don't want to keep going because I want to get a little bit more detail on some of the things that you said. When it comes to disorders, and you talked about how one of the common things of folks who do really well is that they have family support. Um, at the same time, did I lose you?
No.
Oh, okay. So my daughter has an eating disorder, and very, very. I mean, we all have supported her and so forth. I want
difficult.
to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question though, because she said something. I was just talking with her. She's recovered from it. I mean, it's a lifelong affliction. I get
Yes,
that, right?
yes.
But she did really, really well, and this was about 10 years ago, and we're still sensitive of triggers and things like that. But just 3 days ago, we were talking about it, and she said, Dad, she says, the common denominator of people who did really, really well is that they wanted to do very well.
That's number one.
That's number, okay, good. Because the thing was that Kristen wanted to do well. She really wanted to do well. But she said at the same time, most of the people that were in her circumstance would use language like, my parents are making me be here.
Yes.
I don't want to be here. I don't feel like I need to be here. And and so, it was really interesting to me hearing from my daughter that has to be there. That has to
Yes,
be there.
has to
Um,
be number
and
one.
can you comment on that just for a quick sec?
Sure. I mean, it's with any kind of illness, whether it's diabetes, whether it's high blood pressure, whether it is mental illness, whether it's alcoholism, drug use, whatever. If the person themselves don't want to get better and they're doing it for somebody else, then the prognosis is really very bad right off the start. And that was one of the
Got it.
things that I always advocated. I was very lucky that during all my practice, I was one of the only female psychiatrists for 15 years. So lots of people wanted to see me. I was the only child psychiatrist. So lots of children came to me.
Mm-hmm.
Never had to worry about trying to pacify my patients. Let's call them pacify. And
Okay.
the reason why I say that is that a lot of people just come there because they say, oh, I'm going to go see a doctor. I'm going to see a psychiatrist. I'm going to be put on some medication. I'm going to get better. No, that's until unless you want to get better and you want
Yeah.
a better quality of life, you want to get past that. And the trick to having a good therapist and a good doctor is challenging your beliefs,
Right.
challenging
Right.
why you want to get better, if you want to get better. And I always used to show them the door that when you want to get better, come back. Don't make me a trophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
just don't just say, hey, I went to 5 or 6 different doctors and I never got better. Well, if
Exactly.
you don't want to get better,
You're not
then
going to get better.
you're not going to get better.
So
So yeah,
is there something in your experience that has helped people that you've seen um, that has, I think of purpose, right? But is there and I'm not I'm sorry I even brought that up. But I wonder for my audience, is there anything that you've seen that have triggered positively that shift from I have to be here, I'm being forced to be here, to I want to be here?
a couple of things that you really have to focus on is what is their quality of life? Who do they have in their life? Because a lot of people focus on what they have in life, and especially in this day and age, because they see all that stuff on social media. Everybody
Yes.
puts on that
Yes.
most positive, wonderful life. Look how good I look. Look, I'm going shopping. I'm going on vacation. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So much of it is fake.
It is. And but the whole idea is, look at me. If you're not like me, you're a loser. And people buy into that,
That's right.
right?
And it's like a selfie culture, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so my thing with them was to focus on what is good in you. Let's pick out what is good in you that we can foster. Who in your life would you like to be there for? And then if you are not there, how is it going to impact them? And what are you going to get in return by having that relationship with them? And that is the big missing part, like we talked about the other day, that what happens with social media and the texting and all that is you're losing that connection. And if
Yes. Yes.
a lot of people um, make that connection with their therapist or with their doctor. And I was one of those doctors that hugged, that held their
Mm-hmm.
hands. I even
Yeah.
cried with them when they had a difficult issue to deal with. And everybody in insurance says, oh, don't touch your patients, don't make that connection. And one of the things that why I think I was so successful was because I connected. And I think that if you can connect with your person that you're dealing with, I'm not going to call them a patient now because I don't have patients anymore, but I connect with people. And the thing about support is, you asked about the journey, and after retirement and doing my books, the thing that really derailed me from all that was this friend getting cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and how he's all alone. I and my domestic partner are his two main caregivers, and I'm the main one because I'm a physician, and I can go to the appointments and I can understand what's going on, talk to the other doctors about his treatment plan, and go on. But if if he said it one time, he said it 100 times, that if I was not there in his life, he would be dead now. And I fully appreciate that, because when somebody's all alone, they have no way of navigating all the difficult medical issues,
Sure.
then
Yeah.
yeah, they are lost. They're lost in the system. They don't know how to go forward. And there's no way he could have done so many of the treatments and surgeries and everything else that he's had to deal with on his own. So that was a real detract for me. I always said, I will never be a nurse. I was a physician. And when I used to work in the hospital, I would say, I couldn't do a nurse's job. Never say never, because I have been the main caregiver for this person, and I
Yeah.
have really helped him. And we are 5 years past his cancer diagnosis, and he's doing better. We're not out of the woods, but he's doing so much better. And he's that's one of those brainiacs that's doing clean energy. And I have to keep him alive because I want to save the planet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. There's a reason for everything.
There is
So,
a
yeah.
destiny. Indians
Yeah.
believe so strongly in destiny. And
Indeed.
my
Indeed.
mother always says, the God, I'm not very religious, but she always says, God will always put somebody to help you out when you need them the most. And
Yeah.
I have become such a believer that if I and Stephen were not there for Robert, then, I don't know what would have happened to him. So
Yeah.
destiny, yes, I'm a big believer in destiny.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for all you do, and thank you for all you've done. The word retirement is a misnomer.
Yes.
And one of the common definition is you're done with work and you're doing nothing. And unfortunately, one of the, there's a stigma that comes with retirement, right? As
Mhm.
soon as I was in technology for almost 40 years. I was in technology when punch cards were being used, right? Um, my moment of amazement was what I call the K key. And that was when we got a new computer, and it had these things called monitors and keyboards. And when I hit the K key, the K showed up on the monitor. It was amazing. And that's how I got addicted, and that's how I spent the rest of my career. But the whole idea is that the day I retired was the day society rendered me useless. It was
Mm.
really interesting. And part of it too was me, in that I lost my identity that I had for 4 decades.
Mhm.
And but I knew I wanted to write that book right there, American Grit. I
Exactly.
knew I wanted to do this podcast. I knew I wanted to make the world better. I knew I wanted to give back. And yet at the same time, it took me 6 months to get out of this funk, right? Of having lost my identity. And they say that people who retire, a lot of people who retire die within a few years, right? My
Yes.
personal belief is because they've lost their purpose in life.
Right.
And so I am now calling my retirement my renewal.
Mhm.
And it's my opportunity to just do something different. And to your point, you and I are of kindred spirits. Our whole life now is about giving back and
Yes.
helping people, right? And so let's shift gears, and let's go into a little more on purpose and the whole idea of passion. So let's talk about why that's so important and what your experience has been.
Well, like I said, when I was working, I was seeing patients one-on-one and making a difference for just that one person or for that family. Now, with my books, I really want to help a lot of people at one time. And let's face it, people don't read books. So you can write all the books you want to, but
Yep.
if they're not going to read them, then they're useless. And so my thing is now, because of people like you, that I like to get on podcasts. I like to talk about what it is that's important in life. And we've already talked about support, already talked about who is important in your life. It's not what you have. The other passion that I really have, and my purpose, I feel now, is to advocate about good parenting, because that's the problem that
Wonderful.
we're having a lot of issues with. And I think
Yes.
that's why we have such an uptick of mental health illness amongst the young, whether it's true mental health or whether it's the anxiety and depression that comes from them not knowing how to overcome obstacles in life. Why? Because their parents are helicopter parents or snowplow parents, where they don't give the kids the opportunity to really learn. So my thing was, my father and mother came over to America when I was halfway through medical school. We didn't have cell phones. I used to go to a telephone booth once a week on a Sunday, put my coins in, and talk to my parents.
I
That
remember
was
that.
my connection with
Yep.
them. And now the parents want their kids 24/7 having the phones. And it's just now in California they're talking about taking away cell phones from school kids, and I'm like, that should have been day one. I mean,
Yeah.
how are
Yeah.
kids going to concentrate in school,
That's right. That's right.
don't
That's right.
learn and focus? And we talked about focusing, and unless you talk to people, texting people and that. So my thing, it's not only taking care of Robert, but also taking care of my 90-year-old mother. My father passed away 10 years ago. She is an Indian woman who only had high school education. She's never learned to drive. She chose to live alone in the house after my father passed away. It's so funny because my nephews just before my dad's funeral were just saying, what is grandma gonna do? Who is she gonna live with? How is she gonna? And mom made the decision, and I think that has given me so much strength. And 11 o'clock is my time to talk to her every day for about half an hour, just to touch base, just to see how she's doing, and the wisdom that she has passed on to me. So when you
It's
talk about
wonderful.
what you give to each other, it's not only, it's like you said, what have I got back from Robert for taking him on this journey of health for his cancer? He taught me all about computers. He taught me how to write books. He taught me, because being in the medical field, I mean, and I had secretaries and whoever did the typing. I mean, I never touched the typing or writing anything very much. So he has taught me a lot. So that has kept my brain going. When you talk about purpose and passion, without learning something new and without putting in new information in your brain, you're going to stagnate. You're going to get more miserable. You're going to get tired of doing the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And my
Yep.
thing is that, what do you feel good about really just not doing anything or not giving back? And one of the things that I researched in my last book was all the American values, all the American volunteers stuff that people do, how people come out for each other, how um, being a foreigner and an immigrant who came here 40 years ago, I never felt like that. I was so accepted in the community. I have, even though I have lived on 3 continents, sometimes people say, well, you're more British. Well, that's because I was a British citizen when I was born in Kenya, and then I went to England for 10 years for medical school. But I am always number one American before I will be an Indian and I will be British. But I think that people are losing what it means to be American. The people are losing, and that is why I'm speaking out more, and I want to continue these conversations.
So why did you choose? Why have you chosen, and why have you continued? I mean, you could be in the UK. I mean, you could be a citizen anywhere. Why have what are what with your experience, literally and figuratively, your worldly experience? Why are you here? Why have you chosen the United States and America?
My father chose America. When
Okay.
I was 16
But
years old,
you can unchoose that for
yes, I
yourself.
can unchoose that. The only thing
Absolutely.
right now is in England, to practice medicine is a very pyramidal system. You have a lot of uh, general practitioners and doctors, but if you wanted a specialty, to reach up to a consultant level was a very pyramidal system. So either, you had somebody had to die before you moved up the positions. In America, I could be a private practitioner and specialize in my field right from get-go once I finished my residency.
Okay.
Then I also, and the reason why my parents chose to come here from anywhere else was because by doing hard work, you can make something of yourself. You can actually be an entrepreneur. You can give back also to society that has given you so much. And that's what I try and tell people is that America has given me so much. It's given me the opportunity to, I came to this country with minus $10,000. Okay. I had to borrow $10,000 from my parents before I could buy a car, get a house, do whatever. And I repaid him, but in my 25 years of working, I was able to retire at 51, having made have a good income. I worked 24/7. Don't get me wrong, I worked very hard because I was the only child psychiatrist. So I had to be on call for my children, and I was very protective of them. So the only time I didn't take care of them was when I was out of town on a vacation or whatever. So the work ethics, I think that Americans, if they're at a fault, which they used to be in our generation, is that they didn't take their vacation time. They
Right.
worked
Right.
so hard. And so all those good values, really resonated with me and my parents. And then I am, like I said, my domestic partner of 35 years is an American. And so my mother lives here. So it's not something that I can just up and go somewhere else.
If you
Now
could, would you?
I am. Um, Probably not. I have traveled everywhere, but whenever I come back to America, it's like my partner says he wants to kiss the earth, saying, "Thank God I'm home. I
I
love
know that
America."
feeling. Yes, ma'am. Isn't that crazy? And it is, my dad is a World War II veteran. He passed away about 20, 25, 30 years ago. And I grew up to be proud of this country.
Right.
I grew up to, um, celebrate the
Mhm.
opportunity to work hard,
Right.
celebrate the opportunity to make something of yourself, celebrate the freedom that we share.
Right.
And it just it's these days it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard because you see so much fear and you see so much hatred, and it just seems to be growing. And I think you and I, the other part that we share in our spirit is we want to make the world better.
Yes.
Right? We want to make the world better. And I believe that the way to make the world better is by helping one person at a time. When you lift a person, you lift the world. And so to the extent that we can share our experiences, I'm not as extensive in my international experience as you are, but I do know that just about every time I come home, I do want to kiss the ground, and I am grateful. So I wish that everybody had the opportunity to travel,
Right.
and see the rest of the world, because that's how you'd get an appreciation of what we have. So we're in the season of Independence Day, the 4th of July. What do you tell people? What do you tell people about America and about this country, that that's in your heart?
One of the things is the acceptance of immigrants, because we are a society of immigrants. And that's what some of the
All of us.
politicians are beginning to forget, that, when they badmouth immigrants. In my book, when I was writing my last book and doing research on immigrants, they are the people, so many of them are the CEOs of very big companies like Google, of Microsoft,
Yep,
of
yep.
Coca-Cola. And do they not understand that if they don't accept the immigrants bringing this country up, you can, and I'm not bad mouthing the other immigrants that are the farm workers, the seasonal fruit pickers, the people that are doing your yard work, the people that are working on the roofs. We
Absolutely.
need immigrants in this
That's
country.
right.
And just accepting of I think the majority of Americans are good people. I want to believe in my heart that Americans are good people, because we are all immigrants and we have all worked hard. And your generation and my generation knows the value of that hard work. And we've not had to, we've had our share of struggles, but we've also made it to the top. Let's put it that way. And there are few countries in the world that will do that. The other thing that really I cherished was the freedom to be a woman and being able to talk and do whatever, and having the different freedoms that, growing up in the Indian culture, growing up in Africa, because I hate to say this, but the genital mutilation that went on in Africa, some of the books that I read when I was young as to the reasons for them doing that. In Indian culture, we still have the dowry system, which is so bad, and it really it is so disappointing for families to have a daughter born. And can you imagine? I was a third daughter. And thank God my father and mother was so forward thinking that they didn't look at us as daughters, they looked at us as children. But it's funny because my mother still refers to me as the son that she never had, because I'm the one that takes care of the bills, the estate planning, the repairs in the house, and do all that. But there's always that thing that the son is going to take care of the
Right.
parents. But now it's so funny because the parents that are my mother's and my father's age, they all keep saying, "Oh, it's the daughters that are taking care of the parents. Forget the sons."
It does. It does work that way. It in a lot of cases it works that way, and so yeah. Well, listen, we are getting close to time. What would your message be um, to folks again? Celebrating our Independence Day. What would you want your message to be about this country that you'd like everybody to know?
What I want everybody to remember is, look at the freedoms that you can enjoy. Look at the opportunities that you have in this country, if you just put yourself forward. But my main thing is, what kind of a role model do you want to be? And when you talked about legacy, I think it
Yes.
fits in with the legacy, is that what kind of a person do you want to be remembered for? What do you feel good when you see somebody being torn down and somebody being bullied? Do you feel good when you hear somebody call somebody a name? Or do you feel better when you stand up for them? And that's what I feel America is, that we have stood up for other countries. We have stood up for doing the right things. So why not, as individuals, do we not continue to do that in our everyday lives?
I love that. I love that. Yeah, and it's we as a country have made mistakes. We as a
Yes,
country have done bad things.
yes.
But I'll tell I'm from I'm of Japanese ancestry, and I'll tell you a story that that I never heard, that came from my grandmother. And she once told me, she said that at the end of towards the end of World War II, my grandmother and all of her my mom's family um, were told to kill themselves. They were told that when the Americans came in Japan, that they were to kill themselves, and they were given the means to do it. each one of them had a small sword. But then we dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The perspective my grandmother gave me was one that I'd never heard before and I'd never heard since. She said, as terrible as those bombs were, if those bombs were not dropped, I would not be here right now. I wouldn't, because my mom would have killed herself. My uncles and aunties would have killed themselves. Everybody would have killed themselves. So she was actually grateful as being in Japan that happened, because when those two bombs, they were expecting millions of people to take their own lives.
Right.
But when they dropped those two bombs, the Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, said, okay, that's it, we're done. It ain't going to happen anymore because we just have no chance. And we came in to the United States. My dad was an American citizen. He was in the American Army fighting Japan, a Japanese American fighting Japan. And he was part of the Reconstruction. And, there wasn't a single part of Japan that we took over and kept. You look at the Russians, they took half of Germany. They took over a bunch of countries that became the Eastern Bloc. The United States gave everything back. We gave everything back. And
look at how well Tokyo's built up now.
and look at it. And so there's a lot that I'm personally proud of. That I feel a lot of people should be proud of. And in this season of the 4th of July and Independence Day, think about independence. And I tell people, don't think of independence as much as think about your potential lack of independence and your dependence that you have on other things or other people. And ask yourself if that dependence is what you want to have. Do you want to be dependent on the welfare system? Do you want to be dependent on others? Do you want to continue to, because you're living in a country where you don't have to be. And you have a choice. You have a choice. And to me, that's the biggest thing, is that we all have a choice.
Comes responsibility, and that's what
right.
people.
That's right. That's right. And that's not only what people forget, but that's what a lot of people don't want to take on.
Want to take, that's right.
Right. But that's the beauty of this country. Is that you can. Hey, listen, Sheila, if people want to learn more about you, if people want to learn more about your books, where do they go?
They go to my website.
Okay.
With www. And then it's very simple, Dr. Shila, Shila, don't spell it any different, Shila Patel.com. And that way they can get all the information about my books. They can get how they can get in touch with me. They can watch some mini movies that I've made, some things that I talk about. They can get all the information.
And I love your passion.
I am on Facebook, and I am on Twitter, and so they can find me easily. If they just put down Dr. Shila Patel, and if they go to Amazon and books by Dr. Shila Patel, all 4 will show up.
Wonderful. I love your passion. I love the purpose that you've given yourself. I love your idea of leaving a legacy that you want to leave behind. You are going to leave a legacy behind. The question is it the legacy you want to leave behind? And you got to think through this, folks, because none of us are here permanently. And so,
in closing, for me, I just want to say something that my mother says. After my father passed away, and when we talk about him, she always says, look at the smell of roses he left behind. And I always think of it so, it's almost like you can smell the roses when we talk about Dad and what he left behind and the messages he left behind. And why I want to be so much like that I want to be remembered for all the good things I've done and the differences I have made. If you make one thing I end in my books with is, if you made a difference in one life, you have lived a good life.
And you've lifted the world.
Yes.
And you've lifted the world by making that one life better. I love that. I love that. And it's just, let's just keep on going. Let's keep on going, folks. And, the old saying of remember that you're living by example. Okay.
Right.
I like to add to that it's your choice to live by a good example or a bad example. Either way, you're living by example, but just know what you're doing, okay? Because it is your choice. Okay, with that, Dr. Shila Patel, thank you for joining me on Finding Better. That was a wonderful conversation. Folks, share this, let other folks know about it, and thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful Independence Day holiday season, and I call the month of July 4th of July month. And thanks for joining us. God bless you. I love you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you
Bye.
so much, John. Bye-bye.
Bye.